Hello everybody, how are we all doing? To your shock and horror, I do not have a latte. I have a black coffee instead, and it's really, really good. Um, I'm going to be talking about health OCD, and is there something wrong with you? One of the most common questions that I get asked on coaching calls is this. It's where do I draw the line between a genuine health concern versus OCD jump into the worst case scenario? That is the $1 million question for OCD sufferers, especially health OCD sufferers. Now, trying to solve that question rapidly becomes the problem. As with any theme, acceptance will lead you to mental freedom. Okay, so before I give you some advice on how to answer that question and how to go about health OCD, I want to talk about some personal experiences that I had on my health OCD journey. Well, on my OCD journey, but how it also latched to health fears as well. So I remember I had a big fear of getting cancer. That was prominent from quite a young age. That played a big part. Various visits to the doctors, and I remember one particular moment where I was convinced I had testicular cancer, and this was probably when I was about 14 or 15, and I had pain in that area, in the groinal area. I remember it feeling so real. Well, I felt like, well, that's it. I'm not going to make it to my adulthood now. I'm not going to make it into my 20s. That's it. I'm done. That felt so real. My life was going to end that moment. I just couldn't see a way out. It just felt so real very quickly as well. Because what I was doing, although I wasn't suffering with chronic OCD, I was still doing compulsions. I was still Googling for symptoms and I was sort of ticking them off as I went along. I thought, well, yeah, I got this. Well, I don't know if I got that. Yeah, I've got that. Okay, I can relate to this. So I was absolutely convinced that I had cancer, and I then went and got many ultrasounds and many tests and many scans. The problem was that I kept doubting the ultrasound, and I think at my worst I think I had 3 scans. It was in a space of about 1 or 2 months. It wasn't a long time at all, because what had happened was I get the scan and I get the ultrasound, and I would doubt it. I would doubt the result, you see. I would say, well, no, that's wrong because of this, or my symptoms have changed, or this one was different, or the device, the scanning device, or the ultrasound device, that was wrong. That wasn't quite right. Something was off about it. There was a flashing red light, so I don't think I can now trust the result now. Or the person that was operating the machine, the person that was checking the results there and then, they looked tired. They didn't seem like they quite understood what they were talking about. They didn't quite understand my symptoms and how I was describing them. Therefore, what they've advised is wrong, and therefore it's totally invalid. And this one's real, this one's different. So around I would go again. And I remember leaving doctor surgeries after having scans like that. And the doctor would reassure me and say, everything's fine, Sam, it's just part of puberty, it's part of developing. It's natural to have some pain down there from time to time. And I was like, well, no, this one's different. You understand? This one is just the exception from the other one. So what I would do would be almost turning the car around. My parents would be driving me. I'd be turning the car around and then going back to just double check that I didn't miss something, asking the doctor to write it down. You know what doctor's handwriting can be like at times. So I'd be asking them to sort of, either type it out in a Word document so I could then read it a lot clearer. Or drop me an email so I could then read it. I was desperate for relief, you see, desperate for reassurance that everything was going to be okay. And then when I had the scan, I'd have the result, everything's fine, everything's normal. And then what it would say, and which is totally understandable, by the way, it would say, if the pain persists or you notice anything change, notice any movement, please come back. Please get in touch. So what OCD would do, it would take that and run, right? Because it would latch to it and go, well, there has been change. And even if there hadn't, it would make it feel like there has, as we all know, being OCD sufferers, that it felt convincingly real. And I was utterly convinced that this one was different. So round I'd go, I'd have a test and go, yeah, but it's different from the last one. And they'd say, well, yeah, we just see, they didn't say we'd just seen you, but you could tell that they had sort of my records up there, and you could tell that I already had a scan. And they were like, yeah, we'll take one again if you're concerned, for sure. But the problem was with me, this is where I didn't understand what was going on in me. Nothing was ever going to be enough, right? No amount of scans were going to be enough. no amount of tests were going to be enough, because even after the second test, I was still doubting it. I said, yeah, but that isn't right, and I didn't explain it correctly, or maybe the doctor looked away as I said something. Oh no, you didn't listen to that word. That means that makes the difference. That's make or break that word. That means this one's different, you see. And yeah, wow, that was a long time, That, although that wasn't chronic suffering, you can tell the sort of how consuming that was, going to the doctors at 14, 15 years old, asking my mum to book an appointment, asking my dad to go up at 8 a.m. to see if I can get that, that appointment booked in. And the hard thing is that obviously there can be health concerns. I'm a human being, right? I could have had a health concern. I could have had cancer. It could have been very possible for me to have cancer, but because OCD was starting to play a part, and as I was getting older, 14, 15, 16, that kind of age, it was starting to have more of a grip on my life. And as you can tell there, all the reassurance I got, it wasn't enough. My OCD was never satisfied. I was trying to fill up that bucket with a hole in, you see. That bucket was filling up with reassurance, but there was a hole at the bottom, so it was just getting drained and drained and drained. I needed more tests, I needed more advice, I needed more reassurance, I needed more Googling and so on. Thank God ChatGPT didn't exist when I was growing up. Wow, imagine that. I'd have spent the whole time on ChatGPT just Googling my symptoms and cross-checking. Have I got this? Have I got that? Looking at other people that have had cancer. Have I got the same symptoms as them? I'd have been doing that a lot, and that'd have taken up a lot of my time. Like I said, it wasn't chronic, like it wasn't debilitating, I wasn't dysfunction by it, but it certainly was incredibly time consuming and was exhausting, that mental sort of search for reassurance and relief for certainty that everything was going to be okay. But that could never be achieved, obviously. I had to take a risk, I had to run with it and, take that risk and get comfortable with uncertainty. But I didn't have a clue what I was doing when I was 15 years old, understandably so. IBS, that's another thing that I had as a health concern. Absolutely convinced I had an issue with my stomach, my bowels, running to the toilet a lot. And what it was, looking back now, I can still have remnants of this now. I can tell sort of how long I had a jacked up nervous system. With my stomach right now has been the best it's ever been, but even I can have sort of the sensation of needing to go, where I can feel like how that's been prolonged. That suffering, and how that's had its toll on my stomach and my bowel movements and so on. I can tell that. And I was speaking to Elliot the other day actually, and we were talking about sort of the remnants of OCD suffering, and you have sort of those little health things like that, where you can see how just that prolonged suffering has taken its toll on the body in one way or another. And what I was doing was I was constantly changing diet plans. I was avoiding areas where I couldn't run to or making sure there was a toilet there, and if there wasn't, remember, public transport used to scare me massively because I couldn't run to the toilet if I needed to go. But a lot of that was just the nervous system was so jacked up that it affected my stool. I had very loose stool for so long, with nervous system jacked up to the max. And yeah, so I was constantly monitoring that. I was absolutely convinced I had a problem there. Like I said, changing diets, getting reassurance, go to the doctors, checking this, checking that. Nothing was ever enough, you see. But looking back now, it was just how the nervous system was so heightened. This also linked into some of my contamination as well. It merged. So contamination and health OCD, because I was scared of getting ill and scared of being ill for something big, like a vacation or a big day or whatever. So there'll be excessive hand washing, avoiding eating riskier foods, like chicken. If I cook chicken, I'd burn it to a fucking crisp. Excuse my language. I'd burn it to a crisp to make sure that it's, cooked and cooked thoroughly and cooked through, and there can't be any pink to this chicken. So I'd be cooking it to the max, and to a point where it's just unenjoyable because it's just so burnt. And I was absolutely convinced I was going to get ill, so nothing was enough, and I'd be checking it and thinking, wait, that knife that I used to cut the chicken, that was when it was raw, and now I'm using it when it's cooked. Oh my God, that's contaminated. So yeah, it linked into contamination and health there. But the bottom line of that was just the fear of getting ill, and also being at fault for getting ill. I could have done something about it. I could have prevented it. That locked on really hard for me. So the advice, that's a bit about me, the personal experience I've had with health OCD, and I see health OCD all the time as a coach. It's not uncommon to suffer with health OCD. It's one of the most common fears. Because OCD really locks in with the doubt. How do I know whether it's real? How do I know whether it's OCD? What's a concern? What's not? It's deciphering, what working out what the difference is very compulsive territory. So OCD has a field day with that. So if you are suffering with health OCD, please don't be afraid to reach out, because if you're finding that you're acting on urgency a lot, and then you're just thinking, well, they're telling me nothing's wrong, but I keep going back, or maybe it's just consuming so much of your day with the constant anxiety, rumination, trying to solve, trying to figure out, maybe just the panics and the sensations are very high. Oh my God, I can't get ill. No. I've got children, I've got a family, I can't be getting ill. And you're super focused on all the symptoms and getting to the doctors at various times, and you keep saying on ChatGPT and Google all your symptoms, and you're never ever getting relief. Well, OCD is playing a big part there. So please get in touch. It's phil@ocdrecovery.com, and we can certainly help you with that, all the coaches here. So the advice I've got is that you want to be getting comfortable being uncertain. Uncertainty is a huge component of health OCD. Your relationship with uncertainty is going to be absolutely key and absolutely vital for your recovery journey. If your relationship with uncertainty is not very good, you're going to find it very difficult, because OCD latches to all those things that are uncertain. And funny enough, what's the only certain thing in life? It's death, right? So when it comes to health, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be a lot of, I'm not sure. We'll have to see how this goes. We'll have to keep an eye on it. It can be lots of that kind of stuff, right? So, for an OCD sufferer, that's our worst nightmare. So we've got to try and change that relationship with uncertainty and stop trying to chase certainty when it is unchaseable. We're constantly seeking certainty. I need an answer. I need to make sure. I need to be sure of. No, you won't be able to get that, because OCD moves the goalposts. It changes, it switches, it morphs, it jumps between different fears. It feels so real as well. So 1 minute you get relief on one health symptom, and then boom, this one feels different. This one feels like exception, and round we go again. You're never going to be satisfied. So uncertainty is going to be critical for your recovery. Cutting any compulsion to solve. Working out what's wrong with you. Internally checking for symptoms. Scanning. Comparing yourself to people online who may be ill, or symptoms on the website, NHS in the UK, or ChatGPT, Google, whatever it may be, constantly trying, no, I've got this, I've got that, I've got this. Now, look, you're a human being. You could be ill. That's the risk we have to take. And it's not like you can never go to the doctors. Of course you could go to the doctors, right? You're a human being that can genuinely get ill. But when you've got OCD, you've got to factor in how OCD could be mimicking, and it could be hijacking those health symptoms. It can do that, okay? It can make anything feel as real as it can get. So we've got to be aware, right? If you're constantly trying to solve and work out what's wrong with you, and internally check and try to figure it out all the time, you're playing into OCD's hands. You're allowing OCD to flourish, and OCD will keep controlling that, and it'll keep calling all the shots, and it'll get stronger and tighten its grip each time. Okay, so solving gets us nowhere, but you've got to look at why we're solving. What's the beliefs behind that? I need certainty. I've got to know. I cannot sit with not knowing. If there is something wrong with me and I haven't done something about it, I can't live with myself. How could I even ever be happy again if I could have prevented this? How could I ever let myself off the hook if I could have done something about this health concern? Now, the trouble is that that's going to come down to risk, right? Because you're a fallible, imperfect human. You can miss things. The doctor can miss things. Anybody can miss things, right? So we have to take that risk. If you spend your whole life solving, you're going to sacrifice the now. You're going to sacrifice all you got, and that is the now, the current moment. The 6th of August is the day I'm recording this video. You're going to sacrifice that because you're too busy trying to solve, figure out, analyze, replay, work out, trying to get an answer. And OCD is leading you down the garden path to absolutely nowhere. You're never, ever going to get enough. Okay, so be careful of the solving, try and disengage with the solving, but most importantly, take a look and address the irrational beliefs that's fueling and driving the compulsive solving. Next one, reassurance seeking via Google and ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT is one of those where I say, do not use. Now, of course, it has its advantages. It has its benefits. Of course it does. But when you're an OCD sufferer, it's a slippery slope. And why is it a slippery slope? Because it gives you the platform for never-ending reassurance. It gives you the perfect platform to feed your OCD. And that is not going to lead to OCD recovery. You can wave goodbye at your chances of getting better and staying better if you wish to use ChatGPT to satisfy your obsessive compulsive disorder. It's not going to work. Okay, OCD will thrive. It will absolutely thrive the more you seek that reassurance. Now, of course, it can give good advice. Of course it can. It can give very genuine advice. Of course it can. But you've got to look at your intention. You've got to think, well, why am I on here? I'm doing this to get relief. I'm doing this to get an answer. And before you know it, you are absolutely hooked in, because nothing is ever enough. Whatever Google says, whatever ChatGPT says, is never ever enough for you. And you want more and more and more. You go and speak to the doctor, that isn't enough, and you're never ever going to be satisfied. So you've got to be so careful of this never-ending reassurance. It just breeds OCD. It fuels OCD. It stirs it up, and it comes back with a vengeance each time, because you get your relief from your reassurance and boom, OCD rugby tackles you to the ground very quickly once again. Bucket with a hole in. The best comparison for that, the best analogy for that, okay? You fill this bucket up with reassurance. There's a hole at the bottom. No matter how many times you're told by ChatGPT that everything is okay, and by Google that you haven't got X, Y, and Z, and everything's fine and you're going to survive, OCD wants more. That bucket is being drained by OCD, so you've got to keep topping it up with reassurance. Keep topping yourself up with a dose of reassurance, but it's never enough. It's not going to work. You cannot reassure your way to recovery. It's not going to work. Multiple visits to the doctor and never taking the doctor's advice. You have a doubting disorder, you will never be satisfied. When I go to the doctors now, which is very rare, I'm a human. I can get ill, I can have injuries, I can have diseases, I can have problems, I can have conditions, both physically and mentally. I can go to the doctors. But when I do, I take the doctor's advice and I run with it. Okay? Why do I do that? I do that because I'm very vigilant towards OCD. And I know if I start going, oh, I'm not sure about the doctor's advice, I don't know, I'm just doubting what they said, I'm opening the door wide open for OCD to get a grip and to put its foot through the door and start controlling my life again. So I take the risk, I take the chance that, hey, the doctor could be wrong, they're human, they're fallible, they're imperfect. I'm willing to take that risk. But I take their advice and I go with it. And if I'm in total agony and I can't function, yeah, of course, I'm going to contact the doctor again. If I'm totally in a debilitating, dysfunctional state where I'm in so much pain that I need help, of course, right? You're going to act with that common sense there. But if I'm going, oh, I don't know, and doubting everything, I don't know what they said, then I'm going to run with the risk of not knowing and run the risk that they could be wrong and I could be wrong. Okay, and there could be something wrong and it could be deteriorating and I could have prevented it. I've got to take that risk. Okay, and that's what I advise people, because with OCD, the more you sort of try and manually intervene and manually prevent, you're playing into OCD's hands. Okay, taking a risk is going to be absolutely key. OCD will say you could get this checked out now and prevent X, Y, and Z. If only you check this health concern out sooner, then you could have stopped this. Feels like you've got a gun to your head with the pressure on yourself. That linked in with me with the guilt and shame. How could you live with yourself, Sam? If you only got this checked out, then you could have prevented this. And sort of looking at your whole family going, oh, I could have checked this out, but I didn't. You know, I should have done. Now it's too late. Now it's incurable. Oh my God, what do I do? That's the risk that we take, right? I know that's scary and we all have to come to terms with that, right? Like I keep saying, it's not like you can't ever go to the doctors, okay? There can be genuine concerns there that, you know, you want to get checked out, of course, right? Totally. And we actually encourage that many times in calls as well. But we have to factor in how OCD can play a part. So it's just something to please be aware of, because otherwise OCD will call the shots to your life and it'll keep you going back and forth to the doctors. There is an element of risk taking involved with getting better, okay? Fear of fear would jump in here as well. You know, what if this symptom is there forever? I need to get rid of it and of it now. I couldn't live with myself if I could have acted sooner. Fear of having that regret, guilt, anger with yourself forever. Fear of having long-lasting repercussions due to your actions or lack of actions, not getting it checked out. Or maybe you decided to, I don't know, you opened up a can of worms and then it turns out that you had a problem. I don't know. OCD can manifest in many different ways, which actually goes on to my next point, that it can actually be very common for people to also avoid the doctors out of the fear of being told something is wrong. I see that a lot, you know, avoiding taking their blood pressure, avoiding checking heart rate. So it can actually go the other way as well. And that isn't healthy also, because it's not that you need to be at the doctors all the time, of course, as I've been saying, but if you're avoiding it completely, then it'd be a bit of an exposure for you to go and see the doctor or go and check your blood rate, blood pressure, heart rate, you know, take the risk there and risk being told something you don't want to hear. That's also another exposure. So this is why in one-to-one calls we tailor them to you, because I'm not going to tell someone to go to the doctor so they're going every day, and I'm not going to tell somebody to avoid if they're already avoiding. It's tailored for you. It's okay, what you're scared of here, what are you avoiding, and then tailoring their OCD recovery tools, what's going to help them. Okay. And it's going to feel as real as it can get. When your nervous system is jacked up, if you're scared of being ill, if you're scared of having a health symptom or whatever, OCD will mimic that. It will make that feel real. Like I keep saying, you could have a genuine issue. Of course, that's a risk you've got to take, right? But it will feel real. Like if you're scared of something and your nervous system is already heightened, OCD will latch to that. It will latch to any area of the body. If you had a fear of having an itch in your foot, OCD can mimic that sensation of having the itch on your foot. If you're scared of having a brain tumour, OCD can mimic symptoms like headaches, fatigue, brain fog, forgetfulness, memory loss. If you have a fear of having early onset dementia, it can mimic those symptoms. I just read this book and none of it went in. If I got dementia, that would feel so real. That would feel so real. When I had fears of having cancer, it would be mimicking sensations, it'd be mimicking all kinds of symptoms that I read online. And hey, look, there could be a genuine symptom. There could be a genuine cancerous symptom, of course. You can't rule that out. You can't be certain about that, of course. But please factor in how OCD operates here. And something that I have to factor in, and something that everybody that has OCD has to always remember when it comes to health concerns, okay? Because OCD could be playing a very subtle part in these. All right. I delay doctor visits now. If I have a concern, I tend to give it a week or so and think, right, okay. Especially if it feels urgent. If it feels super urgent, I tend to delay it and think, well, if I'm still alive in a week's time, then I'll go from there. Now I know that's risky because that could be a fatal error. I'm aware of that, right? But I'm willing to take that risk because I know that if I start acting on impulse and urgency again, I'm leaving the door wide open for OCD, and doing that and allowing OCD to control my life isn't fun. So the consequences are pretty dire, they're pretty bleak for me if I allow OCD back in with doing compulsions again and so on. Okay, so I always tend to delay doctor visits. But if it's still there, it's a genuine concern, then yeah, of course I'll go to the doctor. Of course there could be something wrong, and I want to try and prevent that. And I want to try and, give myself the longest life possible because I enjoy living. I love living, right? So it's not like I never go to the doctors, but I'm just aware, you see, I'm vigilant towards OCD and how it's operating. Okay, then I get it checked out, I take the doctor's advice and I roll with it. I go with it and then take the risk that they could be wrong, take the risk that something could deteriorate, take the risk that something could change. Of course, I'll keep a concern. There's concern for health, of course. I'm not reckless, I'm not careless in any way, but I'll check that. Okay, the doctor's told me this, give it a couple of months, see how it goes, and then go from there. Okay, if symptoms get so bad, and like I said, I'm in agony, I'm in excruciating pain, of course, I'm going to speak to 999, emergency services, doctors, of course, right? That could happen, but you've just got to be very vigilant towards OCD and how it operates, okay? So just finally, unconditional self-acceptance and compassion for yourself is going to be key, especially with the guilt and shame element of I should have checked it out sooner, I'm at fault for this, I'm responsible for that. Accepting yourself even if you did make a mistake, there's going to be absolutely vital. Having compassion for yourself as a human being, for just if you were ill, being ill, but also the element of, you could have done something about it, you could have intervened. This can also link into family members as well. Like what happens if you notice something in a family member and you didn't mention it? That's a big one. That's a huge one, actually. I might do a whole separate video on that one. Oh God, what happens if I notice something? I didn't say something. And it turns out it was something serious. And now they're, God forbid they're dying or now they're getting worse, or it's got worse and now they're in pain. OCD is going to really latch to that. It's very clever, very crafty how to do that. And so that's very common. So the unconditional self-acceptance is going to be life-saving for you there. It's going to be critical. Unconditional life acceptance, massive, absolutely massive with health OCD. Accepting illness, injury, death unconditionally. The uncertainty involved in life. Seeing that you never ever can be sure, around death and illness and injury. There's a risk involved with all of this. So it's all about changing your relationship with uncertainty, but just accepting the unkind, harsh conditions of life. That's all part of unconditional life acceptance, that people get ill, people die, people get injured, whether it's justified or not. Things happen. Life isn't fair. Life isn't, there's no deservingness. Unfortunately, people get ill prematurely, people die at a young age. It's just one of those very sad things, I'm afraid, that's part of life. So it's all about making peace with that, not liking it. Remember, acceptance is an agreement, not liking it, not wanting it. You can strongly disagree with it and then have a very strong view on it. But a lot of these things are just the realities of life, aren't they? So unconditional life acceptance is going to have to be quite sharp when it comes to health OCD. And unconditional other acceptance, something I wanted to mention here. You know, the doctor could be wrong, right? Guess what? They're fallible. They're imperfect, a bit like us, right? So they could be wrong. They could be making a mistake. They could misdiagnose you. They could miss something. And that's the risk we got to take, right? We can't get 100% certainty. And we have to go with not knowing at times, okay? Otherwise, if we keep chasing that answer, keep chasing that second opinion, hey, second opinion may be very valid at times, of course, but if we keep chasing it with an OCD sufferer, we've got to be very careful, because you see how that opens the door for a very slippery slope. So something to be aware of, okay? Just a final word, just to wrap up this video. Trying to work it out is the problem. You're never going to be satisfied. Of course, you're a human being. You could have a genuine health concern, but please, please, always factor in how OCD could be mimicking and it could be hijacking anything. It will feel as real as it can get. And it's not like you could never go to the doctors. We are not saying that at all. It's not like you could never go to the doctors. You can visit the doctors. You just got to be very careful of how OCD can play a part. Okay? I hope you found this video helpful. We covered this in great detail in the webinar on Tuesday, whenever this video goes out. So I'll just say on the 5th of August, we covered this detailing great topic on the webinar, a very interactive, lots of questions. It was very interesting actually, because there are so many different ways how OCD was operating with health OCD, and that's just how it works. So you're not alone. You know, there's so much hope, and OCD is looking to leave you trapped, not knowing, oh my God, how am I going to know this? How am I going to know that? Well, it's getting comfortable with that, changing your perspective on it, changing your views on not knowing, getting comfortable with not knowing, and ultimately taking the risk by cutting those compulsions and learning to live life on your terms whilst taking the risk and being uncertain. Okay? You're never ever going to be satisfied with health OCD. If you are interested in one-to-one calls, please email phil@ocdrecovery.com and you can book in one of the coaches here. My name is Sam. You have Rob, Nick, Momin, Elliot, and Gemma. I don't think I've forgotten anyone there. Email Phil, harass Phil, bombard Phil, drop him lots of emails, get you booked in, and we can book you in as soon as we possibly can. Guys, take care, look after yourself, and I hope you survive another day. Guys, look after yourself. Take care. Bye-bye.